welcome to the Waiting Podcast. Welcome back if you've listened before. Welcome if you are new. If you are new, my name is Aaron, and I get to host this podcast usually with my wife, but my wife is feeling under the weather today, so she won't be here. So we've got a couple other people here today where we're going to have a great conversation. Here first with Braydon. This is Braydon Bolton.
Yo, what up?
Braydon actually is an intern here at our church, but known Braydon for a couple of years now. One of our leaders in the college ministry and an intern in the youth ministry, which intern with the youth ministry with Dan Calhoun over here, who is our youth pastor here at Grace. And real quick, do your introductions. Tell them a bit about you. Braydon, go first.
I'm Braydon. Like Aaron said, I have been going to Grace for like 3 years now, coming up on 3 years, interning under Daniel, and going to do that up until the end of this semester. I went to GCU at school the last 2 years. Now I'm online GCU, living at home in Chandler, interning, working, and doing...
Born and raised Arizona, right?
Born and raised, Arizona born. Yeah, so that's me.
Sweet. It's good.
Yeah, I'm Dan. I get the privilege of being the youth pastor here at Grace. Been here for a little over 2 years now. And unfortunately, Braydon does intern with me.
Oh, yeah, dude.
I'm trying desperately to pawn him off. Trying to find a good spot for him.
I wouldn't put it that
So
way.
if anybody's interested, need an intern, he's really okay.
He's really
I'm just
okay.
figuring out about this.
How would you rank your interns?
Yeah.
Because you have two.
Yeah.
I have two. Yes.
It's hard because Dan's like my best friend, and we've been best friends for so long. But Aaron is just so wise, and I learned so much.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, where did that come from?
Where did what come from? Your wisdom?
No, why did you just say that?
Well, me and Dan would even say it.
I asked Dan a question, and you talked.
Oh, I thought you asked me a question.
Hey, Braydon. We talked about this before we
Oh,
came
how
on.
would you rank your interns? Because I've interned under you. I
No,
thought you were.
I was asking Dan where he ranks his interns, meaning you and Ellie.
Can we just cut this? Can we just cut this?
Do you think Ellie's watching? Say something. Rank your interns.
Ellie's
I'm not sure if Ellie's watching, but if I had to rank my interns, I would put Ellie at number one.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
But Ellie's my number 2.
Ellie would be number one. Braydon, he's got some work to do to be on the list.
That's fair.
So
That's fair. And I expected that answer.
he's a good guy. He means well. So
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
he's an okay barista as well. So
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
if you've been to Black Rock before on Broadway.
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 Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Dan and I were actually best friends in high school.
Yeah.
Fun fact, Dan was my first American friend. If you want more detail on that story, you should go to the In the Middle podcast and go to the episode that I'm on. You'll hear that whole story. But Dan, you've moved around a lot. Tell him all the different states you've lived in.
Yeah, so I was born in New York, and then
Which
moved-
go Yankees.
Yeah, go
You
Yankees.
see the hat?
Come on now.
Huge
Big
Yankees
Yankees fan over here,
Yeah.
Aaron Wadsworth. He
Yeah.
loves baseball.
Love it.
Loves baseball.
Love it.
So ask him all the questions. But born in New York, moved down to South Carolina when I was like 7 or 8. Lived in South Carolina. That's where I met Aaron. We graduated high school together. And then graduated high school, moved to Washington, lived in Seattle for a little while. And then after that, I bounced around a bunch. I went back to South Carolina, lived in Georgia for a short time, lived in Oklahoma City for a short time before making it to Arkansas, then Texas, and now Arizona.
Jumped around.
For real.
Jumped around.
Yeah.
What was your favorite place you lived?
My favorite place so far is definitely here.
Okay.
Above and beyond anything else. Houston's fine. It's really humid. Not a lot going on in the area that I lived in. And then Arkansas is, it's okay.
Wait, I actually got a DM from a Houston listener
No way.
on the podcast.
Let's
His
go.
name is James, and he lives in Houston.
Let's go.
So don't talk bad on Houston, too.
That's
Yeah,
sick.
James.
Houston's great. I love
Yeah.
Houston. I was in northeast Houston, so it was a good time. It was a good time.
Did you? I know you had like some good times in Seattle. Do you
Mhm.
like Seattle as a city?
I don't. I like the area. I don't love Seattle as a city. I think it smells really bad. It's dirty.
I've heard that.
Yeah, it's just kind of
Really rainy.
But I loved the people I was with, and I loved the church I was a part of. I loved how green it was. I mean,
True.
I mean, yeah, it was. It's a gorgeous place.
Because it rains all the time.
Yeah, that was the thing that was tough. It's just dark and rainy and cold.
Yeah.
It's hard.
And
Yeah. Not a Seattle sports fan.
Not a Seattle sports fan.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Your sport. Well, Braydon was a fencer. How about you tell him about that life?
Yeah, dude.
Actually, though,
Yeah,
like
dude,
tell him
let's
like
hear it.
why you ended up. Because it could be like, why
Give
did
him
you
the
pick
lead up.
fencing? Just
Yeah.
give him like,
Yeah, so I don't
actually-
look as
Yeah.
weird as just saying I'm just a
Yeah,
fencer.
you wouldn't just pick fencing to pick fencing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Most people do, I think, that do
Yeah.
fencing. So I was born with a heart condition called supravalvular aortic stenosis.
Wow.
Dude, that's a mouthful. I've
right?
never heard that,
Super
actually.
cool. Super cool. It's just narrowing in my arteries, my aortic artery specifically. Had 3 open heart surgeries.
Did
an
they know you
abdominals.
had that when you were born, or did it?
No,
Did they find out?
my mom found out. So
Oh.
my mom was the doctors ended up like diagnosing it, but my mom was like, he's waking up, his heart's beating at like 200 miles per hour just while he's sleeping, and there's something wrong. They're like, no, he's fine. We just checked his heart. He's fine.
Wow.
He's like, they're like, no. He's like there's something wrong with him. I know. So she went to like a bunch of different
The mom
doctors.
instincts.
Yeah, she just knew. And so then eventually they put a heart monitor in, and then they were like, oh yeah, there's something wrong with his heart. And they're like, yeah, we know. We already told you that. So then they went in, heart surgery. First one was good. Put a stent in, made it wider.
You were 2?
I was 2 when I had my first surgery. And I had
crazy.
another surgery. And they ended up doing it, and it failed. So then the nurse comes in crying to my mom. And my mom was just like super scared. And she is like, her only hope was that hopefully the doctor would have been coming in if I like died or something.
Wow.
So then nurse shows up. She says they're having to do a back-to-back heart surgery. So I had open heart surgery 2 times in the same like day. Survived that, and then
So it just went wrong the first time? Or they
yeah,
missed something, or
somehow
what?
it just went wrong. I was pretty young, so I don't remember it that well. But then I had an abdominal surgery when I was 5. I was supposed to die to that.
Crazy.
And then Lord protected me, made it out of that. Then I wanted to do sports.
Your family basically took you on like a last
Yeah.
vacation.
Yeah.
You say that, don't you?
Yeah, it was like my own little make-a-wish from
Crazy.
the family. I went fishing, and I went to like this kids museum. They were like, Braydon, like I was having a great time. I honestly remember Michigan. We had to go to Michigan for it. I remember Michigan as just like a fun time.
Yeah.
Because they're like really good at doing that, of just making it seem good, even in the hospital. I remember sometimes when I was in like pain and stuff, but yeah, that's how I remember it, which is kind of weird. And then, yeah, so then I wanted to play sports. I was an athletic kid, energetic, always wanted to play like football or basketball.
So the second surgery in the abdominal one was successful.
Yeah.
Obviously.
We're all good. We're all good. I'm 21,
Yeah.
living, breathing. But so yeah, I wanted to play sports, couldn't play basketball, couldn't play football. And so then I saw fencing on the Olympics. I was like, Mom, could I do that? She's like, maybe, but I don't know where you
Right,
would,
because you couldn't with those because of your heart.
because of my heart.
Mm.
Doctor said I
If
couldn't
you-
do it.
Your heart rate
Yeah.
got too high or something. Is that what it was? Or
Yeah, it was like the contact. I don't think they wanted me to play in any like
okay.
heavy contact sports with my heart.
Gotcha.
And then, yeah, so that was like the bigger issue. So then I ended up doing, fencing on the Olympics. My mom's like, maybe you can do that, but I don't know where in the world you would do that living in Chandler, Arizona. Then it ends up being my dad gets vertigo really bad and thinking he's having a stroke.
Oh, wow.
My dad's over dramatic guy. Just kidding. But so then this is when my baby sister was just born. They go to the hospital, leave the baby sister with me and my brother, who's like, my brother's like 12. And they go, and turns out he just had vertigo. The doctor, whose kids the doctor who's taking care of my dad, his kids fenced, and it ended up being one of the best clubs in the nation for it. I started doing fencing, winning tournaments, traveling around the nation and the world.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I fence. Long
So
story
cool,
long.
man.
Yeah.
Then you decided to give it up recently, like the
Yeah.
last couple of years. Right?
Freshman year of college.
Yeah.
I just did it from the time I was 9 to 18,
It's a lot.
and I was just kind of ready to switch it up, live a little.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was good.
At your best, give us like the ranking breakdown,
Yes.
because I think it's helpful for people
Yeah,
to know like
flex it.
how good you actually were.
Well, I'll just go through the age group.
Okay, cool.
When I was like 14, I was like top 5 in the nation. When I was like 16, I was like top 5, top 10. And then juniors, which is like under 17, I was top 10. And then the highest ranking, which is like Olympic level for the nation, I was like top 25.
Crazy.
Insane.
Yeah, I remember during the Olympics a few months ago, my wife and I were chilling, like watching the opening ceremony, and we were like, "Oh, like what's gonna be on tomorrow? Like what sport?" And it was fencing, and I was like, "We should just get Braydon to come over and watch it with us and like tell us everything." We got him over there, and the funniest part was like he was telling us the rules, and we'd be watching, and he was like, "Oh, I remember fencing that guy." The guys on the TV. Like,
That's so
wow.
sick,
That's so cool, yeah.
dude.
But
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Weird flex. Weird
Yeah.
flex for sure.
love it, dude.
Yeah.
It's a great
Yeah.
story. It really is.
Yeah, no, it's
Of,
awesome.
I mean, praise God your mom had those instincts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just like, no, there's legitimately something wrong.
Yeah.
I've already been seeing that in Eleanor. I think it's a real thing
For sure.
Mhm.
where like things in Korea, and he's only 8 months.
Yeah.
Where I wouldn't have even like really thought about.
Mhm.
And she's always like, that feels off, or even like, we'll just be hanging out and he's in his crib and we think he's sleeping and I don't hear anything and she's like, I'm gonna go check on crew, and then suddenly he's like,
Mm-hmm.
got his leg stuck out in between like one of the crib things. It's like, how did you even like think to like do that?
Yeah.
It's crazy, but
That's crazy.
cool. I'm really excited to have both of you guys on with this conversation we're gonna have actually, because I think you'll both speak really great things to this. But something Braydon wanted to talk about. If you're new, like we ask our guests what they would want to come on and chat through as college students or in that realm. So Braydon decided he wanted to talk about everything to do with purpose and calling, and because I think within college students, especially, or I mean, that's who we're around a lot, but I think it's a thing within everyone of we're so drawn to thinking that purpose and calling is strictly in the only within the circle of your career path, and I think it adds a lot of pressure, especially on college students coming to the end of college, like right? Because when will you graduate? Probably
2026, hopefully
So,
earlier.
like a year
Yeah.
and a half. And I think it's something that I was really holding on to for a really long time. Probably my first 3 years of college, I was just so. I mean, it's all you hear within conversation when you're a college student is when someone asks what do you think your calling is. It's a very Christian word of saying what are you going to do with your career,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, speak to that a bit. Speak to why you wanted to talk about it, your perspective on it right now.
I feel like it came up a lot, like in the last like couple months. I went to something called Camp Love, and I got to lead a small group, and like 2 of the guys in my small group talked about it a little bit, and then one of our friends talked about it, and it was just like, yeah, dude, like I don't know what I'm supposed to do. He's like, should I just like go into ministry and just do that? Because I feel like I just don't know what the Lord has for me, and I just like need help, and like I just need like direction. Like I don't have any good direction on like what I'm supposed to do with my life. And he's like somebody who's just like super creative and can add a lot of value in that world of things. And I think, yeah, so I got to pray for my small group guys, and they were like, yeah, I'm graduating soon. I'm an upperclassman, and I want to do computer technology. How can I like that? That's just like, what am I supposed to do for like God? Like I might like be able to like serve my church or something, but I feel like it doesn't influence the kingdom. And so I just like got to pray with them of just like, you can leverage anything that you're good at for the glory of God. But also in my own self, I think the same thing sometimes, where I'm like, yeah, like I want to do ministry, and like maybe want to be like a youth pastor or this or that. But like, what does the Lord like want me to do? And like, what's the difference between like me choosing to be a youth pastor or the Lord like calling me to this specific thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Dan, what would you say to, right, because I won't speak for you, but I know that what comes with this conversation too is you didn't go to college.
Right.
But you're someone who's worked a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
More than anyone I know, actually. So, you speak to that whole mindset of finding purpose, calling within things, and it not just being solely career path.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that I'll use the words calling and vocation.
Yeah.
I do think there's a separation between your calling and what you get paid to do. I think those are calling on everyone's life. All of us within the kingdom of God who have been called according to his purposes have a calling on their life. We all just have very different vocations. And so even for me, like if you were to ask me, I would argue and say I'm called to ministry in this season. I would argue, though, too, that we're all called to ministry. Right. And I think if I were ever to leave, youth ministry or vocational ministry, my calling doesn't change. I'm still called to serve the church. I'm still called to disciple people. And honestly, I think with that, some of the people who have impressed upon my life the most, one, were not vocational pastors or ministers or whatever.
Right.
But they're people who have served the church well, who have honestly probably discipled more young people than some pastors do in their career. And I think there's a misconception around calling, and that means if I have a calling, I'm called to ministry, vocational ministry. But ultimately, I think we're all called to ministry, and my route was definitely unorthodox in discovering that and that journey, because I did do a lot of jobs, and I did try to find a lot of purpose and meaning in all of those things, and ultimately, that's all misplaced. And so I'm thankful that I landed where I'm at. I'm definitely called to youth ministry. I would not say that I'm called to get paid by a church. It's just what I get to do.
Yeah.
So,
I think calling can be very glorified, where most of the time, I mean, you said the scripture, you're called according to his purposes, and so it's just like, if we're all called, that means there's something immediately as a follower of Christ that you're meant to be doing. I think that's calling. I think calling is, what am I to be? And that can be sustained in every sphere of life. I'm not saying that God doesn't call specifically to specific things, right? Like I feel called to this church, but my calling in general, what I feel like I'm put on this earth to do by God, can be applied everywhere within my life. And so I think that's when you know that this is exactly what God wants from me, and then specifics come from it. That's what I think. And I think especially with the country that we're in, and you probably have realized it just by living in all those different states. And I'd love to hear what you think, Braydon, of a calling to ministry doesn't. It's a very American term. Like people, when growing up in England and just knowing people from other countries too, people who are pastors, they wouldn't. I actually knew a few pastors in England who wouldn't have said, "I'm called to be a pastor." They were just like, "I'm called by God, and as specifics come in ways I can do that, I'll do it." It's just really interesting. I think in America, it's become very like that. It's like the best calling you could get.
Yeah.
And so love to hear what you guys have to think about that. But every time, all I think of a lot with this calling thing, if you want to think of a general one that won't change, in James it says, true religion is to care for the orphan and the widow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's very specific, but what that's speaking to is to love people and to care for the ones who are marginalized, who can't care for themselves, right? A widow and an orphan. Those are very different things, right?
Yeah.
But it's people who are missing something,
Yeah.
right? An orphan is missing a family. A widow is now a widow because they've lost something that was really important. So true religion is to care for people who you should care for.
Yeah.
And that can be in every sphere of life, right? Can be in someone with a marketing degree. It's when you're marketing the people you're around, how outside of work, in your workspace, are you caring for people? So I think that's a general call and it's true religion. But what do you guys have to say?
Yeah, that's so good. I think being in college and like being like excited about the faith, I think like for a lot of times, just like in the people I'm around, they're like wanting more than that, which is probably an issue. And just like our culture is like they're wanting something greater than just to follow Jesus, you know?
Dang. So you think the contentment of my calling is to follow God, that feels, they wouldn't say it, but feels like it's not enough to say to somebody? Right? Do you feel like college students feel like they, in order to be like respected or seen a certain way, feel like they have to be able to say a specific to someone of what they're called to?
I mean, sometimes. And I think it like to students, it sounds cool to be able to like know what that is and have confidence in like, oh, this is like why the Lord has me on this earth for like this specific thing. And this is what I'm going to do. Instead of just being content in who Jesus is and just sitting there and like having true religion. You've talked about it before, and it was something super convicting to our leadership team at Unified. You were talking about it. I think it's 1 Peter. I might be wrong, but it talks about how to live worthy of the calling that the Lord has set before you. And you're like, everybody loves that. This verse has like calling in it, and everybody like worships that calling and like wants that, but they forget that they need to live worthy of said calling. And that's even before you know what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting.
That's so good. I think that really aligns well with maybe how the Bible would almost oversimplify calling, which is when you look at Scripture. Firstly, as followers of Jesus, we are called above and beyond anything else to live holy as Jesus is holy. And we see that through the Old Testament. We see that through the New Testament. My first calling as a follower of Jesus is to live like Jesus did, to follow his ways, to know him, to spend time with him, to become like him, and to do what he did. And simply put, the way the Bible says, be holy as I am holy. That's my first calling. Everything else comes so second to that.
Right.
Whether it's a specific thing or whatever, it's all about pursuing holiness.
I mean, Jesus said himself, he says to his disciples, he's like, come follow me and I'll make you.
Yeah.
So it's as you follow, he'll make you into something, right?
Yeah.
He said, I'll make you a fisher of men, meaning reach people. That's the calling to follow Christ. It's, hey, it's not come follow into this. It's come follow me, and as you follow me, you'll be made into.
It's so
what
good.
you're meant to be made into.
Yeah.
It's so good. And when you look at the disciples, for the 3 years of Jesus' ministry, they didn't do much.
No.
Right? They watched Jesus. And Jesus modeled what discipleship looks like. And, I mean, they literally just followed him. Before then, they went and built the church, right? And so I think our culture glamorizes the platform and the pastorate. And And so we get really confused with that and sense of calling that we have to be on a platform or we have to lead in some higher capacity. When in reality, I think we'd have a bigger impact if people just grasped the idea of following Jesus first.
Well, I think it's why so many people went into a depressive state, including pastors, when COVID hit.
Yeah.
Because suddenly what you have put your full identity in and calling couldn't be done for a while. A lot of people lost who they even were.
Yeah.
Right. And so if everything that I am is me just following Jesus and he'll make me into what I'm meant to be doing, then when things change in the world like that, if you're pastor and your church suddenly has to get shut down, or you're working at a hotel and suddenly the hotels can't happen when COVID was happening, it's like, what is still there? What's still there is I'm following Jesus, and he's going to make me into what I'm to do next. I think this one's always really interesting for me, because I think we're also in a culture of where to be a good pastor, as two pastors here and you who wants to pursue pastoral ministry, I think it's a lot of, to be viewed as a good pastoral leader, it's to make sure that the people within your church are working in their callings, right? Is giving them ways to live out what they're called to be. Something that I felt really convicted of a few months ago, and I've mentioned it to our leadership team in Unified, was I care more about, I'm not saying that it's bad if you do otherwise. What I feel as a conviction on my heart as the leader is I want to teach them how to be without having things to do. I care more about the leaders on my leadership team in Unified to be able to learn how to just be and to exist and to serve and to be a follower of Christ and just be within that leadership team. Instead, I care more about that than to give them so many specific jobs so they feel like their callings are being used. You know, so I think that will serve them longer. I think once they graduate, and a lot of them will move to different states and not be around this church anymore. It's what if they then move states for a job? They find a church and suddenly their church isn't letting them do what they think they're meant to do.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? But if they've been taught here and learn how to just be and exist as a follower of Christ within their church, I think that will serve them longer. But that was a conviction on me for a long time, because I felt like I wasn't giving our volunteers enough, or I felt like I wasn't helping them grow in what they're meant to do. But I realized I was, and just by teaching them how to live worthy of a calling that they have.
That's good. I feel like it doesn't seem like to live holy doesn't seem like a direction in life. And so it's interesting when they're like about to graduate college and there's like any other direction to go, like they could do anything, and they think that choosing just Jesus isn't a direction, but it's just I gotta just seek Jesus, but like God, like, call me somewhere, like take me a direction,
Right.
instead of just being anywhere in life. I don't know.
That's interesting.
I could even say that in like my own life sometimes, where I get caught up in that.
I could too.
Of like, all right, Lord, like, where do you want me to go? Show me. I mean, even over this summer, I had to choose if I wanted to go back to GCU,
Right.
if I wanted to intern under Dan, if I wanted to drop out of school. And I was like, Lord, like, tell me, like, what do you want me to do? And I wouldn't say there was like this moment where he was like, Braydon, just be.
Yeah.
But I would say like I was just like, all right, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to try to do this following Christ. And I've had like way more content. Like, I've had much more of a content heart in choosing to just do an internship, not being around all my friends on campus, by choosing to just do it through the filter of Christ. through just doing through the filter of trying to just do my best job at following Jesus. I would like tell my I thought I was going to struggle not being around my friends because I'm such like a social person. Thankfully, I've been like extra busy, and that has helped as well. But yeah, what a blessing it is to just be able to like have that of just choosing to be.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I think of it when you were talking about that. I think of this a lot. Of we think moments of being called by God. Of that, if anything is presented to me that's different, and any opportunity that's presented to me that is out of the ordinary, that must be God, and I have to take it. Like when I was a junior in college, what was presented to me was what could easily have looked like this is the calling of God in my life. I have to go take it. Junior in college, I'm studying Christian studies, emphasis in youth ministry, and then I get offered a youth pastor job in California. Like that, it's perfect, right? It was like that has to be God, and the church offered to pay for my last year of school. It would have made so much sense. I was single at the time, so I had nothing that was like holding me anywhere. It was just like, I'm in school for this, and I've been offered it, and I didn't really seek it out. It just kind of got put in my lap, and I was like, but nothing in me. I remember when it was offered to me, I was just, nothing in me was like, oh, I really have to do this. But I also felt like I could do this. And so part of that, I feel like that's the faithfulness and love of God, right? That I wasn't choosing between God or sin. I was choosing between, I can stay here in Phoenix and finish out school, and God will go before me and he'll use me there, or I can go and take that job, and that would be cool. I didn't feel like, I think sometimes God does specifically call people to be like, you have to do this. He's done that with my parents. But with me in that instance, it didn't feel like, I didn't feel like an urgency to be like, oh, I have to do this. I also didn't feel like this sense of, I didn't have many friends at that point in time where I was at, but I didn't feel like pressure from my friends of wanting to be like, oh, look at me, I'm going to go and do this big thing. But I feel like what I see in a lot of college students here as I pastor them is things can be going amazing here in Phoenix for them and the school they're in. And they feel like that's not enough. Like, oh, I have great friends, I have a great church, I'm in a great school. But like maybe I should be looking for something more, that I have to do something out of the ordinary. And and so I think, and I'm thankful that I was able to, that my calling wasn't so pressed on becoming a youth pastor.
Yeah.
Because if it was, then I had to take that. But it was pressed on, I think my calling right now is just to be where I'm at and stay here. And then honestly, I met who's now my wife 2 months after I decided not to move. Yeah. So it's just like things like that can happen. And so for the college student listening, if you're just feeling really, maybe if you're struggling with feeling like, am I truly doing what God is calling me to do, unless it's labeled as a really church thing, like missions or pastoral things or anything like that. It's not true. You're called to follow him, and as you follow him, he'll make you into what he's meant to make you. Dan, what would you have to say to that? Because I really do think about you all the time with this, because of how many different spheres that you tried to explore. I know you were really invested in wanting to be in the military for a long time, and then other things. And do you think, I bet there was times where it was with pure intentions of that, I'm just checking this out. Yeah. Do you think sometimes you were putting a lot of identity or purpose? Just speak to that.
Yeah, 100%. I was constantly in and out of wanting to be in ministry, in vocational ministry, full-time ministry.
After high school?
After high school, yeah. So I knew when I was 16 that I wanted to kind of go the route of vocational ministry. Had a guy named Foster Christie who was speaking at a camp, who was just like, man, I just think that this might be something for you. And I took that to heart. Of course, I'm a 16-year-old, very impressionable, and I'm like, that's it. That's what I'm doing. And so it was kind of a done deal for me when I was 16. And from that point on, it was this desperate race to get into the job.
As fast as you can.
And as fast as I can to
Yeah.
get the title. And so I didn't go to college, mostly because school was just not a good option for me.
Yeah.
But also because I felt like hands-on experience was my best route. So I graduated high school, moved out to Seattle, Washington, and interned at a church, and then began this journey of being in such a rush that I would get frustrated that I wasn't in the job yet, that I didn't get the job, I didn't have the opportunities, so I'd leave it and go chase something else. And some of that was just trying to discover, like, okay, maybe I don't need to do ministry, maybe I can, do this, fill in the blank, do military. I ran a jet ski rental company for a while, and done different construction jobs, and was a harbor master, and it's a long list of but in between all of that was ministry and trying to chase the position and trying to chase the calling, and I think it would have serviced me a lot better if I would have, what we're talking about, just taken my time, followed Jesus, and obeyed him. And I think in the midst of all those other things, trying to find purpose in all these other jobs, I would have had a much greater impact if I wasn't in such a rush. Because when I look at Scripture and I look at these moments where there is calling, like you think about Moses in the burning bush, we don't like to admit it or think about it really, but Moses was way old.
Yeah.
He had just been a shepherd for 40 years.
Yeah.
So I think about my journey and I'm like, I would not have been able to wait that long. I would not have been able to sit in a field and shepherd sheep for 40 years. Or King David, somebody who clearly has a specific calling.
Nothing about Jesus' ministry is recorded till he's in his 30s.
Till he's in his
Yeah, it's
30s,
crazy.
right? Like I would have been much better off if I would have been excellent in all of those other things, taken it slow, served the church, probably would have had a bigger impact. We can talk on and on about what could have happened, but what I've learned from that journey is simple obedience, and long obedience in the same direction, right?
Faithfulness.
Just focused obedience. And a lot of times that looks like serving in the church. Some of the people that I think have had the biggest impact, at least people that I've been around in vocational ministry, are people that were just doing their thing and somebody came along and called them out of their thing to be in ministry. But they were serving the church. They were serving in kids ministry or youth ministry or on a production team or whatever for X amount of years before the opportunity came.
Right.
And I just don't think we can overlook that. And I also think you do yourself a lot of disservice in putting your identity in the thing that you do and not the person that you're becoming.
Yep.
I certainly struggled with that a lot, and that's why I changed jobs a bunch, because my everything was in what I did. My everything was in the job title that I had. And I had a lot of pride around different jobs that I had and different things that I did, and none of that matters. I think when I'm on my deathbed at the end of my life, I'm not going to wish that I had become a youth pastor sooner.
Right.
I'm probably
really
going to
good.
wish that I just served the church more,
So good.
that I just discipled more people. And ultimately, I don't need the title, I don't need the job to do that. Which is why I say, if, God forbid, if I were ever out of ministry, my ministry calling doesn't change.
Yeah.
Who pays me gets changed, right?
Yeah.
That's good.
And I'm not leaving ministry. And so
Right.
for those of you who are struggling with that right now, I think the biggest thing is you're in ministry right now.
Yeah.
And oftentimes as a pastor, I find myself thinking with almost a jealous attitude of people who work in the secular world and the opportunity that they have
Feel
to
that.
reach lost people
Feel that a
by
lot.
the way they work, by the way they live their life, because a lot of that in some ways is minimized when you're a pastor,
It is.
Mhm.
because it's so easy to get stuck in a bubble of church world and not get out, there and not live amongst the lost. And you have so much opportunity in a secular job that maybe doesn't mean anything in the kingdom of God. But I would argue even that it maybe means more than
100%.
than anything,
Yeah.
to be in the secular world and serving the church. A great book that I think about is that you and I both love is Garden City by John Mark
Yeah,
Comer,
so
and
good.
it speaks to this, right?
So good.
That your calling is to be holy, for God is holy. But also when we look at the creation story, the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, they had a calling on their life, and it was to work.
Yep.
It was to work the garden, to be fruitful and multiply. That's before the fall. That's before sin. That's maybe the holiest
When it's all
pursuit,
perfect. Yeah.
the holiest calling that you could pursue
Yep.
is to simply work excellently and let that be a testimony to your Creator.
Exactly.
And
I bet Jesus was a phenomenal carpenter,
100%.
right?
I bet
Perfect.
Paul
I
was
bet
a
he was
great tent
amazing.
maker. I
Yeah.
bet he made some
Yeah.
bomb tents, right? And then he did ministry on the side.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think our culture right now does a disservice to young people because it has glamorized the platform, glamorized the title, and minimized the stuff that really matters, which more often than not is stuff that's not seen, that's hidden, that's in the quiet. And I think it's Romans that talks about it. It says, do your best to live a quiet life.
Yeah.
So good.
And I think we would be a lot better if we got back to that
Yep.
and
Yeah.
focus on that more.
It says, I think it's 3 Thessalonians. It's, do your best to live a.
Yeah.
I love how it says that. Do your best to live a quiet life.
Yep. Yep.
Working well with what's in your hands.
Yes.
And it's like, wow. Okay. Like, I think what's interesting too is remember when Jesus like first started coming to the scene doing his ministry, and the people opposing him, like sometimes they wouldn't call him by his name, they'd call him the carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading a book about that, and it's like, do you think Jesus was like okay with being called that? Like, this is Jesus, like King of Kings, Messiah, like
Crazy.
but people were calling him, oh, the carpenter. Did you see he's been doing this? And it's like that just shows he was known for being a carpenter.
Yeah.
When for his whole life he could have easily been like, no, I know who I am, and that's not, you don't call me that. Like, you should call me the Son of God,
Yeah.
right? Which he does get to that point.
Yeah.
But before that, it was who he was the carpenter. That
Yep.
where you're at right now, how you're serving exactly where you are right now is going to determine what's next. But if you're always just what's next, what's next, as people, especially as young people, it's always about, you always want what you don't have, always. Right?
Yeah.
But it's like it's really interesting just being vulnerable with this side of things within ministry. I can easily be like even you said, oh, I get jealous sometimes of people working in the secular world. That's partly true, but partly also because I'm like, it's something I don't have.
Yeah.
When I was working in the secular world, I was working at a school as a counselor. I was jealous of pastors in a church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And then as
So
a
good.
pastor, sometimes there was a pastor of I have a large ministry of a lot of students. Oftentimes because I'm more introverted, I get jealous of people who have smaller ones. But then
Mhm.
when I had a small ministry, I wanted a big one. It's just
Yeah.
like,
Isn't that interesting?
it's just
Yeah.
like you're always just like, I want what I don't have, because you're always looking at what I'm meant to do next instead of what you're doing now.
Yeah.
And I think that's when I found for the first time that what I knew was true of who I'm meant to be and who God has called me to be, when I first noticed that I was doing it right, was when COVID hit and I graduated college. Now I have this Christian studies degree, but now I can't work at a church. No church is hiring.
Yeah.
I started working at a school where I was working with at-risk youth and being a counselor for them. If that's not ministry, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, in that moment, even though it was a really hard job, when I was in it, I didn't feel, I felt the hardship of what the job itself was, but I didn't feel any sense of suffering or hardship that I felt like I wasn't doing what I was meant to do.
Hmm.
And that's where I was like, wait, maybe what I've realized God has called me to do and called me to be can serve me in multiple facets of life.
Yeah.
And right now, it's working vocationally for a church,
Yeah.
right? But I think if this church burned down and it can't exist anymore, who I am and who I'm called to be can still exist wherever I am. And that's when you know. That's what you have to try and discover. Every disciple that was called from something to another thing.
Yeah.
Right? It was
Yeah.
fishermen, now disciples, tax collectors, disciples. And it's
That's
like
interesting.
really interesting.
That's interesting. What was the shift for you when you went from like wanting to work and like what was the shift? Like what changed in you, like young Dan, like, oh, you know what? This no longer, like, I'm not going to fulfill my calling through rushing this, and like I need to slow this down. Like, how did you
Yeah.
get to that
Good
point? Was
question.
that later in, like, once you already were like a pastor, you're like, oh shoot, like
Yeah.
I rushed this, or was it like, oh, I need to slow down, and then eventually
Yeah.
something came?
Yeah, no, it was definitely, I was probably 3, maybe almost 4 years into being a youth pastor. And I started listening to a couple guys, John Mark Comer and Tyler Staton, a lot. And I had begun to kind of awaken to the idea that I was way more interested in the title, in the platform, in the following, if you will, than I was in the actual ministry. And what happened was I was creating kind of this like hollow existence. I had no depth of spirituality in my life because I was enamored with the public figure of being a pastor, right?
Yeah.
And so I began listening to these guys who just over and over and over again in every message and every talk just constantly talked about 3 things: spending time with Jesus, becoming like Jesus, and doing what Jesus did. And then, pointed people towards practices and things that helps you kind of along that journey. And I realized that all of that was missing in my life.
Dang.
And so when I made that switch and made that shift, one, I started to get really angry with where I was in my faith and in my life. Started to get really angry with some things within the church, and started to reach deeper in my faith. And so began having a regular and consistent quiet time. And for me, not for the message that I was speaking or the Bible study that I had to lead or the, fill in the blank, whatever. It became way more about my relationship with God in my own private world. And so that was a big shift and change for me. And I think it ultimately led to, me being here.
Yeah.
And taking this job and coming here because I had to find a space where I could, shrink back a little bit and do the deep soul work to create that depth in my relationship with God that had been missing for so long. And the reality of a lot of places is that in some places you can't afford to do that in the church world. And so that was a big realization for me of like, oh, wow, something needs to change drastically in my life so that I can create that depth of relationship with God. And
It's true.
It was a big change. It was a big shift in my life. It was a long journey of honestly suffering in my faith.
Dang.
Before I was really focused on creating that depth of relationship with God.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Braydon, tell me if this is true for your age range of people, college age, whatever. You hear it a lot. I've heard this phrase a lot tell me if it remains true for your age range of you hear, I think we've romanticized calling. Do you think you see that to be true?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that, but I also think I understand it to an extent
Talk about it.
of like, we want it, and I think it comes from like a good
Yeah, it's true.
heart of just like, God, just give me some direction on where to go. Like, I just want to do what you want me to do. And then like, we've already kind of been talking about it, is like we can do what he wants us to do by just getting in his word, by getting deeper with him in our relationship with him, by like prioritizing the time in like the quiet space of the secret place of just you and Jesus. Something that's like right now in my life, just like transforming a relationship with him, is just going on a walk in the mornings and just like talking with him. And like, I think I didn't like have that when I was at school, and I haven't had it in my life, and I'm starting to see the fruit of just spending time with God. And I think we are made to work. So since we're made to work, we want to see the fruit of our work. And
That's true.
instead of just being with Christ.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know.
good.
Yeah.
I think all I think about is, I mean, that's what both of you have been saying. All three of us have been saying. Everything you do, it just has to flow out of who you are. I as a husband, I don't choose to be faithful to her and only her the rest of my life in order to be a husband. I do that because I am one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? You don't.
Yeah.
As a dad, Dan and I are dads. We don't protect and love our children because that will keep us as one.
Right.
It's because that's just, we are one.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're a Christian, what you do is flowing out of what you are. It's not, I need a calling or I need something to say of what I'm doing in order to make sure people, or make sure I am one. Right. Because it all flows out of like, you could take it to then, do you feel like you have to be doing something miraculous and big time for God in order to for you to feel safety and if you're saved or not?
Yeah.
Right? Or it's like, no, I'm saved, and because I'm saved, now I do, and that will just come over time. Did I know how to be a perfect husband the day I got married? No, but when I got married, I knew that now the steps for me to take is to keep becoming a better one.
Yeah.
And that's Christianity, right? That's following Jesus.
Yeah. It's good.
Yeah,
So good.
yeah. I don't know how long we've been rolling, but let's do some just closing comments you want to say to this. But actually, let's do it this way. As your closing comment, Dan, you go first, Braydon, then I'll go. Just give a piece of encouragement to a college student who maybe is feeling anxious towards the step after college, or is feeling worried about what's next. What does God want for me? Give some encouragement to that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally understand the struggle
Yeah.
of being stressed about that and thinking through that, and not necessarily speaking from experience, but that transition out of college is a hard one. And I would just encourage you to put way less pressure on the thing that you do out of college.
Yeah.
Because 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be the thing that you're doing for the rest of your life. And so I think as you pursue that next step, you got to ask yourself the question, in 5-10 years, is this going to matter? And I think in light of that, and especially in light of eternity, it just doesn't matter that much. What matters way more is you growing in your relationship with God. And to make a fun little Hallmark quote, it's way more about the journey than it is about the destination, right?
Right.
And so
It's true.
I would say fall in love with the nitty-gritty details of your daily life and walk with Jesus, and say yes to what opportunity that you can get out of college, and do your best at it to glorify God and to build his kingdom. and the way that you work will grow the church a lot of times more than what you do for God necessarily or do for the church. The excellence that you bring into that, the way that you live your life that is different to the world around us, will do more to build the church than, in some ways, serving and not to minimize those things, but so
That's good.
Sick. I think my advice or encouragement would just be to be where you are right now, to do ministry where you're at, to walk in the calling that you have currently, even if it's like one more semester or a few more weeks if you're graduating in the winter, to just be comfortable where you're at and to be thinking about the future, but also to not let that hold you back from moving where you are currently, as well as like if you're not serving in a church, even though Dan is trying to minimize it earlier. Just kidding. No, I'm kidding. Serving at Grace has truly been such a big impact in my life as far as getting to, like, some of my best friends I get to serve on a team with now. I served in kids with two of like my best friends for such a long time. Now I'm serving in youth with Dan, my best friend. No, but seriously, serving a church, because you'll just gain a community of people, and also it just feels good to be able to serve your church and be a part of the kingdom in that way as well.
yeah.
So those are my two
great.
things.
Yeah, my last thing would just be, I keep going back to this reference of, as a husband, I'm learning new ways all the time of how to love my wife best, and sometimes I don't do that well, right? And so it's, I think it's knowing who you are, and right now who you are is a current college student or college age, and how am I going to work that out to do best, and learning when to do things, when you should do them, when not to do things, when you shouldn't, because that's what it is as a husband. It's, okay, I'm going to take her on this kind of date right now because for both of us we need this kind of connection, or let's go do this with these friends because that's what's appropriate and needed for this time in order to better our relationship. And it's like, just do that out of your relationship and live for Christ, is figuring out what's needed when it's needed and how to just grow in that, and then that will serve you when you graduate college, and you just continue to do that. But right now it's what Braydon's saying. Right now it's go full force with what you're in right now. Try not to think about the future. I mean, Jesus said it himself, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will worry about itself. It's just, that's not saying, that's not disregarding or negating good planning and good stewardship. It's just to say, what can I focus on fully right now that will benefit tomorrow, and do things that are lasting. And some things that are lasting is like what Braydon said, serve a church, because that will serve you well. Even if you move states, you can go serve another church. And it's, so that's why I would encourage, and like what Dan said, don't get too caught up in what's next or what the career path will be. I'd rather you get into start what's next, knowing that you did what was before really well.
Really well. Yeah.
That's good.
You know.
Yeah.
So I close with that, and thanks for taking the time to listen. We'd love for your feedback. Follow Waiting on Instagram. Would love for if you have any comments or more questions about this kind of stuff, please DM that Instagram. And if you want more, if you have ideas for what you want us to talk about, please do that too. But thanks for Braydon for being here and talking through it. Braydon is someone who's 21, and I was really glad that he chose to talk about this topic, because I just feel like Dan and I have been able to see him kind of work this out.
Yeah.
You know, of the transition he talked about within the summer, and doing that really well. And in the decision-making season of life he was in, he was going about making that decision very wisely and very timely too. Like, he didn't, even though it was a kind of felt like an urgent rush decision, you didn't do it rushed. You did it very, like, you were having the conversation you need to have. And so it's just it's an honor to get to be one of your pastors and one of your friends. So thanks for being here. And
Thank you.
Dan, thanks for your wisdom, bro. Just amazing every time. But this was the Waiting podcast. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.
Boom.